Good afternoon, all. I am Dr. Manisha, President, Sirsa Obs and Gynae Society. Friends, how many times we all wonder that a particular finding of a Doppler warrant an LSCS, or can we wait? So many times CTG tracing bother us, but after LSCS, baby comes out crying and we feel that if we were wrong in interpreting the CTG, to know the answers to all these questions, we Sirsa Obs and Gynae Society, in conjunction with Delhi Society, under the aegis of AOGD, have invited Dr. Manju Khimani, Dr. Rinku, Dr. Manisha Kumar to this webinar. Dr. Manju Khimani is the Director, Department of Obs and Gynae, Max Smart Super Speciality Hospital, New Delhi. Describing Dr. Manju Khimani in few lines would be an injustice to her personality and aura, but I did just state the fact that she was obstetrician and gynecologist to most of PGs and SRs of Harding, and me too personally. For me, she has been there just one call away when I need her. Now, I invite Dr. Kanika, Vice President AOGD, who is Senior Consultant, Gynae Endoscopic Robotic Surgeon, Sir Gangaram Hospital, for the welcome address. Dr. Kanika, over to you.
Thank you, Manisha, for the kind introduction. Yeah, it's very nice, and I'm feeling really great today, being in amongst all the Hardonians. And as as per my knowledge, we all are from Harding, with some of the other connects. Dr. Manju Khimani has been our professor and guide, and Rinku is my classmate and a very dear friend, and Manisha is the professor there. So, Dr. Khemani, I would like to introduce ma'am as she's the chairperson of the endometriosis committee of AOGD. She's been past chairperson of the Safe Motherhood Committee and an ex-professor for Harding. And now she's the director of Max Super Speciality Institute. Doctor, she has two other eminent speakers with her, Dr. Rinku Sen Gupta Dhar. Dr. Rinku is heading the Department of Obs and Gynae at Sitaram Bhartiya Hospital, Delhi. And her chief area of interest is reducing the rate of cesarean section, especially in the private sector, for which she has been nominated by the British Medical Council also. And Dr. Manisha is professor in Harding, and she is a specialist in fetal medicine, and she's heading the sub department of fetal medicine at Lady Harding Medical College. We welcome you all, and I welcome on behalf of the Association of Obs and Gynae Delhi all the attendees for this webinar with eminent speakers. And I would request all the attendees to put in their queries or the questions, whatever they want to ask the speakers, into the chat box or the question answer box on the right side, and they'll be taken up by us in the end of the session. And I would request everybody to stay muted so that there is no echo and the webinar continues smoothly. So over to you, Dr. Khimani, for the rest of the question.
Thank you very much, Manisha and Dr. Kanika, for inviting me here and for the kind words. So I'll start now. I'm audible, na? Am I audible, Manisha?
You're audible, ma'am.
Okay. So I'm going to speak about physiological interpretation of the CTG. Manisha already said
Yes,
that,
ma'am, you're
so many.
audible.
Yeah. So Manisha already has said that, so many times I can hear the background noise. Rinku, please mute yourself. Dr. Manisha, please mute yourself. Yeah. So, Dr. Manisha already has said that, so many times we do CTG, we do cesarean section based on the CTG finding, thinking that this baby is in distress and baby comes out crying, right? Where are we wrong? So let's just, recap, CTG. First disclaimer, CTG monitoring should never be regarded as a substitute for good clinical observation and judgment. And it is also not a mean that you sisters will just strap the CTG and then go and do their work. No, you cannot do that. You cannot leave the patient all alone. And are there any benefits of continuous CTG monitoring? If we compare it to the intermittent auscultation, it is still inconclusive whether CTG is superior to intermittent auscultation. What does CTG do? It only decreases the occurrence of neonatal seizures, but it has got no effect on the incidence of overall perinatal mortality or cerebral palsy. The unnecessary interventions which we do, they are intervention for fetal compromise on the basis of fetal heart tachycardia. If there's just reduced variability and we are intervening, if there's a lack of acceleration and we are intervening, or there are uncomplicated variable deceleration. Why so? We also know that its use is associated with increased, costly, and not infrequently harmful operative delivery of non-acidotic babies. Why so? Because see, all the obstetrician and all the midwives, how we have been taught, deceleration means fetal distress. And what kind of deceleration? According to morphological appearance. What we have not been taught or what we have not understood so far, that we have to see how this baby is defending itself in case of intrapartum hypoxia. So that's what we are going to learn today. Another thing we must know that fetal heart is sensitive to hypoxemia, that means reduced systemic PO2. It is also sensitive to hypoxia, which is reduced oxygen in the tissue, but it lacks specificity for acidosis. So when you are doing fetal heart rate monitoring, or if you are even adding some secondary tests, you will be doing increasing the operative delivery of non-acidotic babies, because fetal heart rate is non-specific. It cannot tell you about the acidosis. It can only tell you about the hypoxia. We must understand that. So what is the normal CTG and what is its significance? Many a times, in the morning when I've sent my patient for induction at 6 o'clock, patient has reached. The induction has not been started at 7:30. So when I call the labor room and I ask the sister, why haven't you started? They will say, Dr. Kimani, patient तो आया था, पर CTG की variability बहुत कम थी. हमने उसको ऑक्सीजन लगा दिया, लेफ्ट लेटरल पोजीशन दे दिया, अब ठीक है हम शुरू कर रहे हैं. So this is what I want to emphasize, that this period of reduced fetal heart rate variability, which alternates with the period of increased variability or acceleration, it is called the cycling behavior and it is normal. Fetal cycling activity is a key behavioral state of a normal term or near term fetus, not in the preterm. And deep sleep can last in these fetuses for 50 minutes. And in these 50 minutes, there will be stable baseline, very rare accelerations, and borderline variability. So don't take this that this is something pathological. When the just observe that this thing CTG trace. After the baseline, when it is a quiescent, again acceleration and normal CTG will start. So this suggests, this cyclical variability suggests that there is a neurological integrity and there is an absence of significant acidemia or acidosis, right? So when is this fetal cycling activity absent? That means those period of when there is a reduced variability followed by normal CTG. When is this absent cycling activity? This is absent when there is a hypoxia, when there is a choriomyelitis, when there is a severe meconium aspiration syndrome, when there is exposure to drugs including oxytocin, or when there is an intracranial hemorrhage. It is also absent in babies who are less than 32 weeks of gestation. So what does normal CTG signifies? Once you have taken a CTG, you've seen its baseline is good, there are acceleration, there are no deceleration. This indicates that this is a normoxic baby. Baby does not have any hypoxia. Baby's acid-base status is also normal. There is absence of asphyxia. And there is a very low probability of developing intrapartum fetal asphyxia, barring if there is an obstetric catastrophe like cord prolapse, placental abruption, or scar rupture. It also suggests that fetal neurological and cardiovascular system, they are intact and they are able to react and defend the fetus against intrapartum insults. So once we have seen a normal CTG, we should be reassured that yes, everything is fine in this particular pregnancy baby. We all know that normal baseline heart rate varies from 110 to 160. But how do you calculate? So take a 10-minute strip in this. For 2 minutes, the baseline should be constant. Take this as the baseline. And this baseline, which you are taking as a baseline, it should not last for more than 10 minutes, because then the baseline will be different. So here is a one CTG on my left hand side, which is showing baseline heart rate, which is somewhere around 130. And here there is an unstable baseline, no baseline, here in this particular CTG. So tachycardia, we all know above 160, lasting for more than 10 minutes, and bradycardia less than 110, lasting for more than 10 minutes. Many times these post-term babies, patients, when they come, they are in labor, and the fetal heart is constantly 107, 108, 110, and we are scared, is it normal? Yes, it is normal. In post-dated pregnancies, fetal heart sound could be on the lower side, and we need not worry for this. Here you can see a normal variability in the normal CTG, and here you can see the reduced variability. So what is normal variability? Normal variability is that blend with amplitude of 5 to 25 beats per minute. As you can see in this, if you see here, it is varying from here to here. So anything which is 5 to 25, it is normal variability. And it tells us that baby does not have any acidosis. Reduced variability is when it is less than 5 beats per minute, and it at least should last for 50 minutes because the cycling pattern could be there. So once the variability is less than 5 beats for 50 minutes, we say it is a reduced variability. And if there is a deceleration, and in that deceleration for more than 3 minutes, the variability is less, we say no, it is a reduced variability. Absent variability is when it's absolutely flat line without any acceleration. So here you can see a normal variability, and here it is a reduced variability tracing. What is saltatory pattern? Increased variability is called saltatory pattern. And here the value of the variability exceeds 25 beats per minute, and at least it should last for 30 minutes. What is the pathophysiology of this? We still do not know its pathophysiology. It is presumed to be caused by the fetal autonomic instability, and intervention may be required sooner if this pattern is seen during the second stage or during the deceleration. So if it is lasting for less than 30 minutes, relax. But if during the second stage, after deceleration, if there is this saltatory pattern, we must intervene. That means something is wrong. And a saltatory pattern for more than 30 minutes may indicate hypoxia even when there are no deceleration. Here is the saltatory pattern. If you can see, it is varying from 130 to 160, 30 beats per minute. So in order to exhibit a normal variability, the fetus requires intact cerebral cortex, midbrain, vagus nerve, and cardiac connective tissue. So cardiac connective tissue. So if the baseline fetal heart variability is good, all these 4 organs of babies are normal. Even in the presence of deceleration or bradycardia, if you see that variability before the deceleration was good, variability after the deceleration is good. So this baby is at a very low risk of ischemia or of immediate death or asphyxial brain injury. Moderate fetal heart rate variability is strongly associated 98% with a pH of 7.15 or with an Apgar of more than 7. So if you've seen that variability is good, for decelerations, don't panic. In contrast, if there is an absent or reduced fetal heart rate variability, it is associated with significant fetal acidosis in term as well as in the preterm fetuses. So one reassuring point is that look for the variability. Now, if we see 100 patients where the variability was absent, at least 25% of these babies will have acidosis. That means 1 out of 4 babies who are showing no variability or reduced variability will have acidosis. And there's a positive relationship between the degree of ischemia and depth of deceleration. That means more is the deceleration with this variability, more is the acidemia. And minimal or undetected fetal heart rate variability is the most consistent predictor of newborn ischemia. What is sinusoidal pattern? In this, in 1 minute, there'll be sign-like waves, 3 to 5. And in pseudo-sinusoidal, they are sawtooth appearance, irregular zigzag, right? And what does it indicate? So sinusoidal pattern is there's an amplitude of 5 to 15 beats per minute, frequency of 3 to 5 cycles per minute, and this pattern lasts for more than 30 minutes. To say that it is sinusoidal pattern, observe it for 30 minutes. If it is lasting for less than 30 minutes, it is not sinusoidal pattern. And it will coincide with the absent acceleration. And this kind of pattern is seen when there is a fetal anemia. Maybe because of the fetal maternal hemorrhage, maybe twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, or there is a ruptured vasa previa. then only you say that. Sometimes sinusoidal pattern is also seen in cases fetuses where there is a hypoxia. How do you differentiate the sinusoidal pattern with the sinusoidal pattern? So here, as I said, there is a sawtooth appearance, but its duration does not exceed 30 minutes. It's characterized by the normal pattern which precedes it and afterwards. That's how you differentiate between the pseudo-sinusoidal pattern and sinusoidal pattern. And this pattern you will see when you have given, say, pethidine phenergan to the baby or morphine, to the mother for the pain relief. And this is usually of the short duration. Coming to deceleration. Yes, baby has deceleration and the obstetrician have distress, right? So this is early deceleration, right? Which is coinciding with the contraction. This is prolonged deceleration. And these are the variable deceleration, sharp fall and sudden pickup in less than 30 seconds. And these are the late deceleration, very slow fall and very slow rise. So deceleration, why do decelerations occur? These deceleration, the purpose is to reduce the myocardial workload when the hypoxia is there. This is baby's defense mechanism. And early decelerations that are gradual from onset to nadir, more than 30 seconds, they coincide with the contractions and they are likely to be seen in the late first stage or the second stage of labor. They do not indicate hypoxia or acidosis. So if you are seeing early deceleration, relax. Don't intervene unnecessarily. Coming to variable decelerations, they exhibit a rapid drop, V-shaped, as I showed you in the previous slide, from onset to nadir in less than 30 seconds. And they most commonly occur during labor. They are also seldomly associated with fetal hypoxia or acidosis unless they become gradually U-shaped and they show 60s criteria. I'll be coming to what is 60s criteria. And they are, if they are associated with reduced or increased variability or with the deceleration, then only they are pathological. So what I mean to say that if there is a variable deceleration, the variability is good, relax. If there is a variable deceleration and gradually it is becoming U-shaped and the variability is losing, then only it indicates that there is a acidosis. 60s criteria is that if suppose if the baby's heart rate was 130 and suddenly it has fallen by 60 beats, that means it comes down to 70. And it reaches 60 beats per minute for the duration of 60 seconds. That is 60s criteria. So even if the variable deceleration, which is showing this 60s criteria, that is abnormal. Coming to late deceleration. Whenever there is a late deceleration, here is the fetus who's hypoxic. So early deceleration is not hypoxia. Variable deceleration is not hypoxia unless it is showing 60s criteria. Only late deceleration shows hypoxia. These are gradual in onset and they gradually return to the baseline. And either there is a reduced or increased variability within the deceleration. This gradual onset and return occurs when more than 30 seconds elapse. These decelerations are indicative of chemoreceptor mediated response. In trace which is showing no acceleration and reduced variability, the definition of late deceleration also could be just an amplitude of 10 to 15. That means you are seeing a trace where there are no acceleration, where variability is reduced. And though there are deceleration, but only 10 to 15, shallow deceleration, but they are also significant because there is no variability. So whenever there is a late deceleration, yes, now this baby has hypoxia. Whether this baby has acidosis or no, that fetal heart cannot tell us because it does not have the specificity. Coming to prolonged deceleration. Any deceleration which is lasting for more than 3 minutes, right? Now, any deceleration which is lasting for 5 minutes and fetal heart is less than 80 beats per minute and there's a reduced variability within the deceleration. These are usually, this indicates that there is an acute hypoxia, acute acidosis, and it requires an urgent intervention. So, mind it, a deceleration for 5 minutes with reduced variability means urgently intervention. But when the duration is lasting for say 3 minutes, what will you do now? Here you can see the tracing, that it was absolutely normal and no variability, and suddenly it has dropped to 80, then it has come down to 60. So what is the cause of this physiology of hypoxia in labor? There are three extents: cord prolapse, placental abruption, or uterine rupture. And there are two iatrogenic causes. Suppose if your patient is lying supine, there is a maternal hypotension syndrome. or if you have given the pop-up of the epidural and patient's BP falls down, or if there's a uterine hyperstimulation. So these are the only causes of acute hypoxia in labor, right? This will present as a prolonged deceleration lasting more than 5 minutes or for more than 3 minutes if associated with reduced variability within the deceleration. So here you will definitely intervene. So what is the management? How do we follow the 3-minute rule? So one thing is clear that if the deceleration has occurred to say and it is lasted for 3 minutes, the variability preceding that was good. 90% of them will, 95% will recover in 9 minutes. So that's why one should follow this 3-minute rule. What is this 3-minute rule? That observe it for 3 minutes. If it's not coming, now you need help. From 3 to 6 minutes, what will you do? Try to find out the cause. Do a PV. Is there any cord prolapse? Look for the signs of accidental hemorrhage. And if you find any of these, then immediate intervention is needed. If you are finding an iatrogenic cause like supine hypotension, turn patient to the left side, start IV drip, and if you have given the pop-up of the epidural, please summon anesthetist to help you. And suppose if it's a hyperstimulation, the patient will respond to the tocolytic. In 6 to 9 minutes, if it is not showing any signs of recovery, you have to rush the patient to the OT, and within 12 to 15 minutes, this baby has to be out. Unless otherwise, the baby will be neurologically damaged. So important notice that if the deceleration is for 3 minutes, right? But before that, there was no variability. Before that, there was lack of cycling activity. Then don't follow this rule of 3. Immediately do something. But if normal variability in cycling before and during the first 3 minutes of deceleration, as I said, that 95% will recover in 9 minutes. One has to have the patience. So just see the tracing before and after. Don't just jump for that 3 minutes fall. Yes, 5 minutes is acute hypoxia. You have to intervene. Now here is a subacute hypoxia. What is subacute hypoxia? Here baby is spending most of its time in the deceleration. Just see, deceleration coming up, deceleration coming up. And this is almost invariably caused by the uterine hyperstimulation. How do you believe the manage? Up to syntocinon, avoid supine position, start IV fluids, and administer the tocolytic if hyperstimulation is the cause. But if it persists, then despite tocolysis, then if the patient is fully dilated, apply vacuum or something. If patient is not fit for normal delivery, take the patient for cesarean section. So even in subacute hypoxia, observe. If it recovers, very good, nothing to worry. But if it doesn't recover, then you must intervene. So how do you diagnose subacute hypoxia on CTG? As I said, that here the fetus spends most of the time in deceleration. And if it is encountered in the second stage of labor, ask the mother to stop pushing. Let the fetus recover. If no improvement is seen within 10 minutes, then one has to expedite the delivery. Once the fetal heart becomes stable, tell her to push again. And if it recovers, then you have to expedite the delivery. And in the first stage, what will you do if there is a subacute hypoxia? As I said, if you have put the propase, remove it. Syntocinon, stop it. If no improvement, give the tocolytic. If still no improvement in 10 to 15 minutes, then you should take the patient for cesarean section. That means you should review the slide, you should review the whole scenario rather than just rushing every patient for cesarean section unnecessarily. Now coming to gradually evolving hypoxia, right? Where do you see this? I've seen it sometimes, when these Afghani patients come for labor, you tell them that this patient is having distress, they will not agree for cesarean section. And this is the kind of pattern you see. What do you see in this gradually evolving hypoxia? So it happens in this order. First, there are decelerations, right? You don't take any heat. Then there is loss of acceleration and lack of cycling. So first was deceleration, then lack of acceleration. Third thing will be these decelerations, they become wider and deeper. Then there is a redistribution of the blood to the brain and catecholamines are released. So there is a rising baseline. So deceleration, loss of acceleration, these decelerations become wider and then rising tachycardia. Further redistribution will occur and then variability will be reduced. So from 1 to 4 stage, deceleration, and that even with tachycardia, baby is in compensated stage. Baby has not been damaged. But once the variability is lost, this baby is now has some kind of damage. And last will be the terminal failure. Here is the slide which is showing. So initially you see there were decelerations, right? Then this baseline heart increased to 180. Still you did not take any action. Then there was lack of variability. And lastly, the terminal failure. Now coming to chronic hypoxia. Now this is an antenatal type of hypoxia. That means this patient had hypertension, it's a growth retarded fetus, absent end diastolic flow, and you do a CTG, what do you see? You will see that there's a baseline rate is the upper end of normal, there's a reduced variability and hardly any acceleration, and sometimes there will be shallow deceleration also. So this represents a fetus who will not be able to withstand the labor, and you must terminate the pregnancy depending on the baby's condition. So here you see chronic hypoxia, very reduced variability, no acceleration, shallow deceleration. This is a patient where no kind of labor intervention should be done. So this is the management protocol for the acute hypoxia. As I said, the first, if it is preceded by normal variability and cycling, and normal variability is during the 3 minutes of the deceleration. Exclude all the 3 causes: cord prolapse, abruption, uterine rupture. Correct the reversible causes. If no improvement by 9 minutes or any of the accident diagnosed, then immediately. So take home messages. Evaluate CTG with complete clinical picture. Be aware that if CTG parameters of baseline fetal heart rate and variability are normal, the risk of acidosis is very low. Even if the CTG is classified as pathological, but if the baseline fetal heart rate is stable, variability is reassuring. According to both NICE and TICU guidelines, no intervention is needed, only careful observation. Thank you very much. Now I'll invite Dr. Rinku to show us the CTG tracing and their interpretation. These CTG tracing are from the cases which she has handled. Over to you, Dr. Rinku. Okay, so I'm going to talk on the Doppler during pregnancy. Okay, a topic which we really don't like, because with the jargon of RI, ST, PI, half time we don't even know which value to believe and which value not, and we can't even remember so many things. Sometimes I was not don't even give us the correct interpretation. So let's just go through the slides, to know what we should know about the Doppler during pregnancy. Now, according to the ACOG, practice bulletin number 12, IUGR is one of the most common and complex problem in modern obstetrics. It has a poor detection rate, limited preventive or treatment options. It has multiple associated morbidities and increased likelihood of parental mortality associated with the IUGR. Not only immediate mortality, even later on, in the adult life also, these babies who were IUGR in the birth, they can have cardiovascular diseases, chronic hypertension, in the adulthood or obesity. So how to define FGR? This is the Society of Maternal Fetal Medicine's latest recommendation. According to this, FGR be defined as sonographic estimated fetal weight or abdominal circumference below the 10th percentile. So no single weight means it is an IUGR. It is on, you have to plot the weight of the baby on the graph and then see how this baby is growing, whether it is coming to the 5th percentile, whether it is coming to the 10th percentile, and then only you can see that this is an IUGR baby or it is not an IUGR baby. We all know there is no treatment, right? We also know that there is no cure. There are minimalistic preventive measures. So what do we know? That you have to do close surveillance and absolutely correct time where you have to do the delivery so as to avoid the acidosis. Of all the fetuses who are diagnosed with the FGR, approximately 18 to 22% neonates will be constitutionally small. These are constitutionally small babies, but they're healthy. They don't need any monitoring like the for the FGR babies. Because see, so many of the women, they are short-statured, hardly weigh 40 kgs. So we'll be seeing quite a lot of these, constitutionally small baby in India. So significant challenge is how to differentiate whether this is a constitutionally small baby or whether this is a pathologically growth retarded baby. So for that, again, you have to plot it on the graph. Now, if you see this baby here, initially it was on the first ultrasound only, it was at the 5th percentile. Next ultrasound when you did, again it was on the 5th percentile, but the interval growth was maintained. Next ultrasound, interval growth is maintained, again 5th percentile. So this either it's a wrong date or it is a constitutionally small baby. You can on one ultrasound you cannot say it's a FGR or if it's a constitutionally small. You have to plot it on the graph. Now if you see here, baby, initially it was on the 25th percentile. Next ultrasound, the AC lagged here, and the third ultrasound, it came below the 5th percentile. So this is a FGR baby. This is a pathological baby who will require close surveillance and delivery at the appropriate time. So to measure the growth of the baby, 2 ultrasounds should be done at the interval of 14 days. So on one side, we have constitutionally small baby. They don't need any extra monitoring. Once you have diagnosed this with constitutionally small, monitor as a normal fetus, normal baby, normal pregnancy. On the other side, we have FGR, where we know there is a uteroplacental insufficiency, and this baby is likely to have hypoxemia or acidosis. So if you remember, like my dadi and nani used to say, हमारी 10 डिलीवरी हुई, 10 में से 2 बच्चे पेट में खत्म हो गए, एक बच्चा बाहर आके खत्म हो गया. उसके 10-20 साल के बाद में जब हमारी obstetric services और improve हुई, then we obstetrician were not me, I mean the obstetrician before me, or maybe I was also in one of them. We were delivering these babies, and these babies were preterm babies because we didn't have the Doppler facilities. So these preterm babies who were growth retarded, they needed more of NICU care, and they had a lot of morbidities. Now with the Doppler surveillance and with the better NICU care, this we are saving more babies, and they are neurologically normal. Remember, it is not only important to give a crying baby, healthy baby to mother. It is also important this baby after 4 or 5 years should be neurologically normal. Now all the terms like growth retarded, restriction, they are out. We only use now the fetal growth restriction. So we are treading on a very narrow path. If we do early delivery, baby will be preterm. If we wait for a very long time, baby will have fetal demise or acidosis will be there. And we also have to consider what is the gestational age, what is the estimated fetal weight, because depending on the weight, survival will be there. Whether you have given the steroid cover, whether you have given the Maxel for the prevention of the cerebral palsy. And if in case you don't have any NICU facility, please transfer this baby in utero for its better survival. And also we have to see the mother's condition. So we are treading on a very narrow path. So there are two kind of, Rinku, please mute yourself. Rinku, please mute yourself.
I have already muted.
No, Rinku, you are audible. Please mute yourself.
I'm muted, na?
So there are, according to timing of diagnosis, there are two kind of growth retarded babies. One, early onset, where you diagnose it less than 32 weeks, and late onset, where you are diagnosing it more than 32 weeks. Rinku, please mute yourself.
वो बार-बार मुझे ही कह रही है.
हाँ, रिंकू, आपको बोल रही हूँ, म्यूट हो जाओ बेटा. Neeraj, thank you. So early onset IUGR, they are more severe. The late onset one, they are milder. 70 to 80% of IUGR, they are of the late onset. And hypertension is associated with the early onset. Patient will have renal disease, hypertension, preeclampsia. Problem in the early onset is its management. Problem in the late onset is diagnosis. Why? Because suppose normally what we do after 30 weeks, 32 weeks, we may not do any ultrasound. But if you don't do an ultrasound at 34 to 35 weeks, you will miss out on this and you will have an unnecessary IUD. So it's better to do an ultrasound at 34, 35 weeks so that we don't miss out on these late onset, more than 32 weeks FGR. So these early onset FGR babies, they have a very good tolerance to hypoxia because chronically hypoxic, the late onset, they have a very low tolerance. You will see an established Doppler pattern in the early onset IUGR, but not in the late onset. So early onset, they have a high mortality and morbidity. Late onset, they have a low mortality, but they have a poor long-term outcome. In an early onset, what will you see? You will see a deterioration in the Doppler from abnormalities in the umbilical arteries, ductus venosus, and then abnormalities in the ductus venosus and the CTG abnormalities. While in the late IUGR, umbilical artery will be normal. Only thing which you will see that the cerebral circulation is not showing you that yes, this is the IUGR baby. So, if you have diagnosed early onset, less than 32 weeks FGR, first thing is do a detailed ultrasound. Rule out that there is no anomaly. You are not missing out on that. If normally, if the baby is small, blood flow is less, urine output is less, so amniotic fluid is also less. So if you see an IUGR baby with polyhydramnios, here chromosomal microarray analysis has to be done to rule out the chromosomal anomaly. Or if you find an absolutely unexplained isolated FGR patient has no hypertension, nothing, less than 32 weeks, here you should do the chromosomal microarray analysis. So Nicolaides, he said that, Doppler can be used to assess both the fetus and placental circulation with the aim of doing the diagnosis and monitoring, in which cases growth restriction, fetal anemia, and twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. So Doppler has value only in these three conditions: growth restriction, twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, and in the fetal anemia. Why Doppler? Because the single most important prognostic factor in fetuses with growth restriction is gestation age at which you are delivering. So every single day which you are giving to the baby inside, you are increasing the survival by 1 to 2% till 32 weeks. So with the Doppler, we can precisely keep on giving this patient 1 or 2 days till the Doppler is showing normal. That's why we choose Doppler to monitor these growth retarded babies. Here you see, if the baby, this umbilical artery is Doppler, within 1 week, 0 baby per 1,000 will die. Suppose if you are monitoring only with the NST, you will still have mortality. Suppose if you are monitoring them only with the biophysical score, there will be still a mortality. So that is the advantage of Doppler, that if the Doppler is normal, umbilical artery is normal, within 1 week, there will be almost this mortality. So that's why we choose Doppler. Let's just recap the fetal circulation. Then you will be able to understand the Doppler. Now here's the placenta, right? From the placenta, the umbilical vein gives the good blood, oxygenated blood, passes through the liver and then through the ductus venosus, which is a very turbulent vessel. And from here it goes to the heart. Heart will pump this good oxygenated blood to the brain, to the myocardium, and to the adrenal. And slightly less oxygenated blood goes everywhere else, right? Now, once this less oxygenated blood, it is distributed and then it goes back through to umbilical arteries, the placenta. Placenta has a very low resistance to the blood flow. So placenta, whatever blood comes to it, placenta says, "Aajo, mere paas aajo," in a normal this thing. So commonly, which Dopplers we are using? Umbilical artery, middle cerebral artery, uterine artery and ductus venosus, and more specialized the umbilical vein. What do these vessels tell us? We all know that trophoblast invades the uterine artery and makes it into a channel so that the maximum blood goes to the baby. So if the uterine Doppler is abnormal, it tells us that yes, there is a resistance. The trophoblastic invasion was not proper. Umbilical artery Doppler tells us reflection of placental vascular resistance. As I told you, umbilical arteries are taking blood back to the placenta. So if the placental vessels are obliterated, it is not receiving the blood, then umbilical artery will become abnormal. Middle cerebral artery, now brain is a one organ which knows whatever happens, I am going to get the maximum blood supply. So its resistance is high. Placenta is low resistance, brain is high resistance. So middle cerebral artery, it reflects fetal adaptation to hypoxia, because as hypoxia happens, the vessels become dilated. And ductus venosus tells us about the condition of the baby's heart, myocardial dysfunction. Umbilical artery Doppler is most commonly used for the monitoring and timing of delivery of fetus, which are compromised by the FGR only in the early onset FGR. It tells us the resistance of the blood perfusion. We know that if the number of placental arteries per high power field they are less, umbilical artery abnormal will become abnormal. So all those maternal conditions are placental conditions which cause obliteration of the tertiary stem villi. They will lead into abnormal umbilical artery Doppler. Here is a picture of, just to recap, these are the tertiary stem villi. And what is abnormal umbilical artery? So we say abnormal umbilical artery when the PI is more than 95th percentile. Nowadays, RI and SD, they are not taken into consideration. You tell your ultrasonologist that give me only the PI and give me in the form of percentile. When it's more than 95th percentile, that means diastole is reduced, we say it is abnormal umbilical artery. If you still don't pay any attention, then it will become absent end diastolic flow, and then it will become reverse end diastolic flow. I'll show you the traces to show, tell you what what are all these factors. Now, if how much time it is going to take for the abnormal umbilical artery to progress from this Doppler can decrease diastolic flow to absent or reduced end diastolic flow. It will take several days or weeks, especially in the absence of maternal disease. Now, this is a normal umbilical artery. Good systole, the flow is there in the diastole at 14 weeks. Good systole, good flow in the diastole, right? This is normal umbilical artery at 14 weeks. Now, what happens when the placental vessels are obliterated? It is not receiving blood back from the umbilical artery. So, there is a resistance. So, this first thing which happens, the absent end diastolic flow after the initial thing will be that the PI will be more than 95th percentile, then there will be absent end diastolic flow, and lastly, it will be reverse end diastolic flow. So you must learn to pick up a tracing and see for yourself. Not only read the report, but please learn to see the report for yourself. So this is the normal umbilical artery PI. When 25% vessels are obliterated, you will have a high umbilical artery PI. When more than 50% vessels are obliterated, you will have an absent end diastolic flow. When more than 70% of vessels are obliterated, you will have a reversed end diastolic flow. So that is the meaning of all these words. How much time do you have if your PI is more than 95, or if you have end diastolic flow, or if you have reversed end diastolic flow in this large study? We had 26 days once the PI was high, 12 days once the absent end diastolic velocity was seen, and 4 days once the reverse end diastolic velocity was. I mean, this is not a hard and fast, but one should have this idea in the mind when you're managing this patient. Okay, I have so many days in my hand. And incorporation of umbilical artery Doppler in the evaluation and management of high risk. How does it help us? It reduces the risk of parenteral death, prevents unnecessary induction of labor and cesarean delivery, but it has no benefit in low risk pregnancy. So in a normal growing fetus, please do not ask for Doppler. It is not going to help you at all. But in late onset FGR, umbilical artery Doppler does not tell you about the adverse pregnancy outcome. Why? Because for the umbilical artery PI to rise, a threshold of placental vascular obliteration is required. That means so many vessels have to be obliterated before the umbilical artery PI will be rise. And therefore, the presence of normal umbilical artery Doppler in late onset FGR does not rule out placental disease. That means placental disease is there, but it is less. That's why umbilical artery is not becoming abnormal. Absent or reverse end diastolic flow in the umbilical artery is commonly associated with the severe birth weight less than 3rd percentile FGR or with the oligonucleus. So how often you should do these Doppler once in a suspected IUGR? So according to RCOG guidelines, you have diagnosed that this is a growth retarded baby, right? FGR early onset, but umbilical artery flows are still normal. If they are normal, repeat it after 14 days. And you should follow one guideline. like these Society for Fetal Medicine, they have given a different guidelines. So if you keep on those guidelines, some this, you'll be confused. So just one fixed guidelines. If umbilical artery Doppler flow are normal and if this FGR, repeat it after 14 days. When umbilical artery Doppler flow indexes are abnormal, right? Uh, 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 so when it is normal, we are repeating it once in 2 weeks. But when it is abnormal, then we are repeating twice in a week when the end diastolic velocity is present. But when it is absent or reversed end diastole, then we are doing it daily. I hope I'm making myself clear. If the umbilical artery is normal, we are repeating it after 2 weeks. If umbilical PI is high, we are repeating twice in a week. If it is absent end diastolic or reversed end diastolic, we are repeating it daily. I'll just leave this, In a setting of reversed end diastolic velocity, what will we do? We'll admit the patient, we'll give her the corticosteroid, we'll do CTG once or twice in a day, and if baby is already said 32 weeks, why should not I do all these things? Because I know my nursery will be able to salvage this baby. So everybody should know what their NICU is capable of saving, which baby NICU can save. So everyone today, and depending on the CTG abnormalities or depending on the DV, then you will and you take the complete picture. Suppose the patient's BV is very high, then you can't wait. So you have to treat the patient in total, not only on the Doppler. So what should be the management of patient with absent or reverse diastolic flow? So in terms of timing of delivery in preterm, that means below 32 weeks of gestation, FGR baby with absent or reverse end diastole, delivery is recommended at 32 weeks of gestation, right? With delivery prior to this time recommended when the DV becomes abnormal. So if the baby is already reached 32, deliver the baby. At a later gestation, that means after 32 weeks, if you see that the this absent end diastole is there or reverse end diastole is there, then one can, according to CTG, carry it, but not later than 37 weeks. What does middle cerebral artery tell us? It is the largest vessel in the brain, and it carries about 80% of cerebral blood flow. So whenever there is a fetal hypoxia, as I told you, brain always gets more oxygen. So brain says, मैं तो राजा हूँ, बहुत high resistance blood vessels रहते हैं उसके. But when there is a hypoxia, brain has to get more blood. So then there occurs vasodilation, what we call brain sparing effect. I repeat, placenta is a low resistance. When the placental vessels are obliterated, umbilical artery PI is high. When there is a brain is affected, PI falls because there is a vasodilation. So measurement of flow through the middle cerebral artery using Doppler can identify cerebral vasodilation. We also measure CPR. CPR is a middle cerebral artery PI divided by the umbilical artery PI. And when the CPR is less than 1, please deliver the baby. This baby will not be able to carry much longer. Now, this is what a middle cerebral artery flow looks like. Initially, it is like this, high resistance राजा जी है. फिर जब ऑक्सीजन कम हो गया, तो vasodilation शुरू हो गया. Now, here if you see, this is normal middle cerebral artery. This is mild vasodilation. Diastole is keeping on increasing, and this is marked vasodilation. The PI has markedly decreased because diastole is increased so much here. So, role of MCA Doppler is not in the early IUGR. Its role is clear in fetal anemia. When the MOM is more than 1.5, it predicts fetal anemia. But what is its role in the IUGR? In the FGR, there is a brain sparing effect leading to an increased diastolic flow and hence reduction in the PI. A fetus is considered to have a brain sparing effect when the ratio is 5th percentile for the gestation age. For umbilical artery, more than 95th percentile. For brain, less than 5th percentile. Another measurement which we are taking, as I told you, MCA PI upon umbilical artery PI, what we call cerebroplacental ratio. This cerebroplacental ratio, it has a greater sensitivity than assessing the MCR umbilical Doppler PI in isolation, especially in the late IUGR. this is depicting, this is the MCA PI, and this is umbilical artery PI. And you are dividing and you are calculating the cerebral. All these things are given by the ultrasound. You don't have to calculate yourself. Your ultrasoundologist, if is good, automatically he or she will give you all these values. The stance of RCOG guideline is that MCA Doppler should not be used to time delivery in preterm growth restricted fetuses. So as I told you, in preterm fetuses, umbilical artery, end-Dastley, reverse Dastley, and then CTG monitoring. MCA value is only in the late onset IUGR or in the term babies. So in late onset IUGR, abnormal NCA measurement has been associated with adverse parental outcome and neurodevelopmental abnormalities. So what does this abnormal CPR tells us in these late onset IUGR? It tells us increased rate of fetal distress in labor, lower umbilical cord pH, and high rate of admittance to the neonatal intensive care unit. So you deliver the baby before the CPR becomes less than 1. As you know, this is late onset FGR. Thus, the Doppler evaluation of MC is mandatory and CPR must be calculated. If in the third trimester, obstetrician is only seeing the umbilical artery PI, late onset IUGR and all these intrapartum postnatal complications will be missed. Now here is what a ductus venosus blood flow looks like. This is a S wave, ventricular systole. This is a D wave, and this is atrial wave. So it is a bifid wave like this. If you see it in the real so here is the normal ductus venosus blood flow. So what happens when it is abnormal? First, the diastole decreases, and then if you don't take any bleed, then it becomes reversed, right? So in ductus venosus, first it will be absent diastole, then they'll be reversed. DV reflects the physiological status of the right ventricle, a marker of cardiovascular deterioration in the response to FGR. Now the heart is getting less blood supply, that's why it's getting deteriorated. And abnormal DV, that means absence or reversal of A wave, has the potential to predict stillbirth, ischemia, but all this only in the early onset FGR, not in the late onset FGR. Late onset FGR, only CPR. It is currently recommended by the RCOG that the DV Doppler should be used for the surveillance and timing of delivery of preterm growth-restricted fetus with an abnormal umbilical artery Doppler, provided fetus is viable, you have given the steroids, and the level of evidence for this is good. So, predictive ability of abnormal DV is further revealed. How when the DV becomes abnormal, there will be reduced fetal heart rate variability on the CTG, biophysical profile will become abnormal. What does the Society of Fetal Medicine says? It says, invariably abnormal CTG findings, they will precede the DV findings. That's why they are not giving much attention to this. We all know that once the absent end-gastric flow is there, or reverse end-gastric flow is there, you are doing twice in a day CTG. So what it says that CTG will become abnormal much before the DV becomes abnormal. Only in 11% cases, DV will become abnormal before the CTG. Now coming to the third message, uterine artery Doppler. Uterine artery Doppler assesses the maternal component of placenta blood flow, and it is a marker of remodeling of the spiral arteries, right, by trophoblastic cellular invasion. So what happens normally? The trophoblast invades, there is a low impedance circulation, and uterine artery is show continuous forward flow in the diastole in a normal pregnancy. There is a continuous forward flow in the diastole because of the trophoblastic invasion. So, and in this thing, severely early onset FGR, what happens? Trophoblasts do not invade, so there is a reduced uteroplacental perfusion. So, this is what a uterine artery, see good Dastley, here. And this is an abnormal uterine artery. You can see the notching, the dash P is much less. These days, we don't pay much attention to the dash P. It is only the PI which matters. So uterine, how does it help? Uterine artery Doppler can help us to distinguish the specific cause of growth retardation from the other causes. So we do a screening test at 20 to 24 weeks, right? And if we see the PI, and if the PI is disturbed, then we know, yes, this pregnancy may have problem later on. So mean uterine PI at 12 weeks should be more. If it is more than 2.85, at 20 weeks, it's more than 1.85. PI is all that matters. We are not paying any attention to notching, to SD, or to RI. So if you see at 12 weeks, uterine artery Doppler, it is abnormal, right? You see the PAPE, it is less than 0.4, maternal age, all these parameters you take and then you predict. And all this is on the computer. Everything is given on the net. Then you start giving this patient ecosprin 150 milligram at bedtime to prevent PIH, right? Because this uterine artery Doppler, this is according to Society of Fetal Medicine. RCOG still says that you do the uterine artery Doppler. Society of Fetal Medicine says it does not help us much in the diagnosis and management. So they don't recommend it. But as I said, you should follow one guidelines. And I still feel RCOG guidelines, they are much better. So what happens in these babies? First, there is a high uterine artery PI, early growth started. Then what happens? Umbilical artery PI becomes increases. Then decreasing CPR ratio. Liker keeps on decreasing. Then biophysical profile becomes bad, decreasing fetal activity, loss of variation, all this. And lastly, then baby has the acidosis. So doctor will pick up all these things much before the biophysical profile becomes abnormal. And umbilical vein, the emerging evidence suggests that an abnormal DV PI for vein must coexist with the UV pulsation to accurately predict the adverse perinatal outcome. And this is how, in early onset IUDR changes progress. First, umbilical artery Doppler becomes abnormal more than 95th percentile. Cerebroplacental ratio becomes abnormal. Then absent end-diastolic flow, reversed end-diastolic flow. Then ductus venosus become abnormal. And then ductus venosus shows these A wave are seen, reversal of A wave. Then pulsatile umbilical vein. Then CTG and biophysical profile, and lastly fetal death. But every baby may not follow the same pattern. This is just a summary of all this thing. So how will you when will you deliver? The most important, why we are doing doctor, we don't have to deliver a preterm baby, but at the same time we do not want to deliver a acidotic baby. So the Society of Fetal Medicine says that we recommend delivery at 37 weeks of gestation in pregnancies who have FGR and umbilical artery waveform with decreased diastole, but without absent or reverse end-diastole. So if there is no absent and everything is fine, but though it is FGR, maximum you can carry them till 37 weeks. So estimated fetal weight is 10th percentile. This is a flow chart. You do a multi-vessel disease. Umbilical artery Doppler is normal. Umbilical artery PI is more than 95th percentile, but end-diastolic flow is present. You are doing twice weekly Doppler in this baby, and you are delivering at 37 weeks, right? And if the baby is not growing for 3 weeks consecutively, then you will deliver that baby early. Now coming to therefore this is for the other absent end-diastolic delivery at 33 to 34 weeks of gestation is recommended, and for reverse end-diastolic flow delivery at 30 to 32 weeks is recommended. This is again a flow chart. So estimated fetal weight is 10th percentile. Do a multi-vessel Doppler, umbilical artery Doppler. If it is normal, then you are repeating it every fortnightly, and you are offering delivery at 37 weeks, right? Now, if the umbilical artery PI is more than 95th percentile, you are doing twice weekly Doppler, and you are delivering this baby at 37 weeks or 34 weeks if it is there's no growth in 3 weeks. But if there's absent end diastolic flow, if there's a reverse end diastolic flow, then you are doing a daily Doppler. And for absent at 33 weeks, at reverse for the reverse end diastolic flow before 32 weeks, 30 to 32 weeks. So what is the take-home message of all this? Doppler investigations, they gave insight into the fetal and pregnancy pathophysiology. In the second and third trimester, it can indicate abnormal presentation, fetal hypoxemia, fetal anemia, and impending heart failure. And when apt vessel is used optimally at the right time and it is inserted also correctly, you can optimize the PO better out. Thank you very much for the patience here. Now I'll hand over the mic first to Manisha. Manisha, because it will be in continuation, Ringo, then you can show your CPG. Is that fine?
No
But we want
problem.
to do it first.
No problem. No, that's fine. Whatever you
Manisha,
decide.
Manisha, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Manisha, start.
Okay. So before I begin, I would like to thank the organizers and Dr. Manju Kimani for inviting me. And I'm really feeling so nice after hearing to the ma'am's presentation. And so we have listened to all this theoretical portions, and now it's a time to understand and see how much we have gathered from here. So just I'm arranging my slide. So we will go case by case and be very deal with practical things over here. So before I begin, I would like to just emphasize what ma'am has already said, that for any baby, the diagnosis of FGR is very important, and the other thing is when to deliver is very important. So we should not be too early, we should not be too late. So that's a very important crux in this management of FGR. And for this, Doppler plays a very important role. The other thing here is we have to understand is when we take, say, suppose we are taking 100 babies, 30 of them will be small. Now we have to see that among those small babies, who all are FGRs. So if you will really see, you will find that 10 of them will be FGR and 20 will be just small for gestational age. So we have to, remove the needles from the stag hash. So for this, you have to, rely on Doppler and on biometry also. So other thing here is that if we deal with 10 FGRs, out of those 10 FGRs, 7 would be late onset and only 3 would be early onset. So when you see a population, you get more babies who are small for gestational age, and more among them also more would be having late onset FGR, which is difficult to diagnose, and very few of them will be early onset FGR. So with this premise, we will start with the case. So our case one was Mrs. N, and she was a primary. She came, we was 19-year-old, and she came at 35 weeks one day. She came with gastroenteritis, and when we saw her in the ward, her gastroenteritis was resolving. And then when we just examined her per-abdominally, we found that the fundal height was less, and it was around 30 weeks, and the Leica also appeared reduced. Other investigations were all normal. She didn't had any high BP and all, and so we did her ultrasound. So on our ultrasound, we found that the AFI was less. So what is the cause of her reduced Leica? Is the important question. So is it because of her gastroenteritis that she's having decreased Leica, or is it because of some other cause? So here we have to really see, because most of the time what happens when a patient comes to us and while we are discharging, we do an ultrasound and we just see Leica and we just discharge the patient. We don't stress on her biometry. So here it's important that we do biometry, because only after you find and you suspect that it is FGR, that we will do a Doppler also. So, when we did her biometry, we found that the BPD was 33 weeks and the AC was only 29 weeks, as you can see here. So it was only 29 weeks one day. And for not only this, we must see at the what is the measurement also, because this measurement we are going to put in the chart and see where it comes, where does it come in the centile chart. So it's very important, it's very easy and very interesting also, to see the measurement and then to apply it in the chart. I'll tell you in a minute. So what happens is, in this patient, we were, worried whether it is small for gestational age or it's FGR. So here we see that I've just measured this and I've put that it was less than the third centile, that was 269 given by a different chart. So this was obviously less than the third centile. So we say that it is said that if the fetal weight or the fetal AC, if it is less than third centile, you actually don't need to do a Doppler. To diagnose, you don't need to do a Doppler, and you can say very well that this baby looks like FGR mode. And for a Doppler, of course, you need, but for the management, to find out how frequently you're going to see the baby. So in this case, we suspected that this is probably FGR also, and we looked at the reference chart. So I have for you all, I have just copied this reference chart, which we have in our ultrasound room. We can have it in our chambers also. And generally, they say about the reference chart that it should be a chart which should be population based. It should not, we should not copy any Western thing, but we generally recommend this chart because this is a WHO recommended intergrowth 21 chart. So this had Indian population also. So this is believed to be more close to our Indian population. So as you can see here, at 35 weeks, our measurement was 300. I'll just go back and again recalculate. It was 249. So when we see here, and that it is 273 is the third centile. So our AC was less than third centile. Again, our weight was 1500 something, and the third centile is 1792. So this baby fell into FGR group only. So this was something which we realized after looking at the chart. So what was the next step? Going to the Dopplers. So we saw the Dopplers, and we saw that the umbilical artery, as you can see, the SD ratio is 3.5. And the PI is 1.14. As ma'am said, we must not look at the SD ratio. I mean, even if you're looking at the SD ratio, look at the PI mode. Okay, so when you see a PI, so normally for an umbilical artery, for an average, you can understand that anything which is more than 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 is bad. So here it was in normal limits. When we looked at the MCA, as ma'am has said, we are looking at late onset FGR here. So we are not going to rely so much on the umbilical artery. So we did the MCA also, and we found that as we talked about CPR, CPR is nothing but MCA PI divided by umbilical artery PI. So as you can see here, it is 1.2 divided by 1.1. So that is just more than 1. So we were like, but this patient had a SD ratio of a little bit borderline, and of course the CPR also was just 1. So we were a bit wary about this patient, and because her the biometry was less than third centile, we had to follow this patient. We cannot say that your gastroenteritis has resolved and now you can go home. So this patient needed monitoring, and so we monitored this patient. Before we go into this patient, I'll just in brief, ma'am has already discussed, but I'll just in brief outline the important points about late and early onset FGR. The problem is late onset is diagnosis, as we saw in this case. And as ma'am has already said, there is higher tolerance of hypoxia in early onset, but these patients who are a late onset, they have got less adaptation, and so they are jeopardized quite early and they are missed very soon. So we must look at these, and they constitute a larger fraction of pregnancies. Now, what should be the management in this case was our main dilemma, and how would we plan termination? So I hope we understand that in this patient, the Dopplers were all right, but because she was late onset FGR, we need careful monitoring. We called her for Dopplers every week, and then we asked her to daily record her fetal movements, and of course we did her non-stress test, but this patient, because she was under follow-up, after 3 days she complained of decreased fetal movement. And this time, when although the NST was reactive, but because she was FGR, we thought we must terminate this pregnancy, and we induced her, and she delivered normally, and it was a 1.56 kg baby. The thing is here that we have induced this patient. So have we done right? Should we go for cesarean straight away? But I think we were right in inducing her because her Dopplers were almost normal and there was no absent flow or reverse flow. So we have induced her and she delivered normally. So that was one good thing about this case. So point to remember, we have already discussed, I can skip also, but the thing is that if it is less than third centile, the weight and the AC, you have to stress upon this and think it to be FGR. Okay, and umbilical artery PI should be seen as ma'am has stressed again and again. And Doppler, if normal, gives us assurance for 7 days. That is the thing. And Leica also plays a very important, although it doesn't come under the management, but it just gives you a feeling whether this baby is okay or not, and whether you have to, see this patient quite frequently or not. So you must look at the Leica also. So we come to case 2. Case 2 is Mrs. R. She was 22 years and she was gravida 4, para 2, L1 and E1. She came at 32 weeks and she had leaking PV when she had come.
Manisha, can I interrupt?
Yes.
Manisha, can you hear me? Manisha, throw a short because Rinku also has to speak. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So in this patient gave history of hypoplastic nasal bone at around 20 weeks, and she had an amniocentesis done also. And this amniocentesis was followed by fish examination, and on fish fluorescence in situ, it was found that it was normal. So she carried on with her pregnancy. And there was history of laparotomy, as we know there is E1, so ectopic was there, and she had previous 2 LSCS. And now here the BP and all of the patient, the blood pressure was normal, and that means there was no maternal high risk as such, okay, apart from leaking PV. Now in this patient again, we see that this the AC is 180 and it is 22 weeks, whereas the BPD is 28 weeks. So we know by now that this is of course an early onset FGR because it is less than third centile and because it has started before 32 weeks, so it is early onset. So we come to the umbilical artery. So we did the umbilical artery Doppler of this patient, which showed absent flows, as we can see here. So once we have an absent flows and we have a patient who is preterm and just around 32 weeks, so what are we going to do? So we are going to give her DEXA cover. So because she was leaking, gave her antibiotic, and we followed with daily Doppler. And because we were worried about the fetal weight, so as you understand here that whatever is our nursery, whatever is the our neonatal facilities, according to it, we should act. And so we generally, we consult them, and we had a talk with them, and they said that okay, of course the baby is around 900 to 1,000 grams, so we can try to salvage. And at the same time, because the pregnancy had already advanced, so we can of course terminate this pregnancy. And because she was having leaking also, and she was previous 2 section also, and most importantly because she was having absent flows, we went for cesarean. So this was the baby who was delivered, and it was 916 grams. The baby was in NICU for a long time, but recovered, and the baby was, of course. So in this case, there is a role of Baxel, as ma'am has said. So magnesium sulfate could be given, but because she was 32 plus 2, we didn't give. So it has to be given only when it is less than 32 weeks. So we'll come to the next case. So this has already been discussed, so I will not go into this. And it is the stage-based protocol that we follow. So we'll come to the case 3. Case 3 was a 24-year-old.
Manisha, this is the last case. Then we hand over the mic to Rinku. Okay. We are running short of time.
Yes. So this shall we stop it here? I think you had a very nice presentation, ma'am. So we will just stop here, or should we continue this case? Hello, ma'am, I'm not able to hear you.
Manisha, just finish this case and no more after that.
Okay. So this
Quickly,
patient Yeah. So this patient was 34 plus 4, and she was having oligohydramnios also, and she was referred from somewhere with FGR. So she came as 34 plus 4 with cephalic presentation. Her NST was reactive, but she had not received DEXA cover at that time. And when we did her Dopplers, we often get this type of case. These patients are referred to us at a point where they are having these absent flows. So what should be our management is the main dilemma. So as you can understand from the charts that have been given to us and the management protocol that have been given to us, if she is already 34 plus 4, she doesn't need DEXA cover as such. Plus, she is having absent flows and she is more than 34 weeks. So we need to terminate the pregnancy, we need to deliver her, and we have to go in for cesarean. So in this case, we did. So in this case, one important thing was when we did the ductus arteriosus, we found that they were reversals, and so we immediately decided upon delivering this baby. And this baby was a 1 kg baby, the girl, and she also went to NICU but recovered. So these are our some success stories that we had. So I'll just finish here, and I will not proceed with any more case. And thank you so much for this. And any questions are there, then we can take at the end.
Thank you very much, Manisha. Rinku, over to you.
Yeah,
Start
yeah,
now.
yeah. So I'll try to be as quick as possible. So, we all know that maybe only 14% cesareans that we do for fetal distress actually have distressed babies. And this is a study which we did, which was done in Lady Harding. So we all know that babies come out crying. And one of the reasons why we should, one of the reasons why we should always retrospectively analyze each case of our fetal distress is it's not moving. Each case of
Yes.
Okay, so this is a case which is showing a CTG with multiple decelerations, if you can see. Now all these decelerations, ये अपने आप कैसे हो रहा है?
नहीं ठीक है हाँ अब बताओ.
No, ma'am, आप change मत करिए, ma'am. I
अच्छा,
keep
ठीक
getting
है.
confused,
हाँ,
please.
हाँ.
So, एक मिनट छोड़ दीजिए. Again, it is coming. Is anybody else changing my slides?
No.
ठीक है? So, as we all know that, in labor, the baby's heartbeat will change as per the baby's stress levels. Now, every labor is associated with uterine contractions, which are transient changes for which the baby will undergo a transient hypoxia, and the baby will undergo some fetal heart changes as a reaction to this momentary or transient hypoxia. Again, नहीं बढ़ रहा है. So, again, now you look at the CTG, you see these decelerations, and these decelerations are rapidly falling down and rapidly picking up. If you look closely, you see that the baseline is well maintained and there is a reasonable amount of variability. Now, supposing this patient comes to you at 5 centimeters and she's a low risk mother and the previous history is not significant. For this kind of a CTG, you don't have to worry. You just have to wait and see what happens next. Now, in this particular mother, we waited. And as you can see that for some reason, my slide is not moving here. It's not moving at all.
Should I move? You tell me. Just tell me
Okay,
next. And
okay, ma'am, you move. एक मिनट छोड़ दो.
can you? This is the next slide.
Next slide, please.
हाँ.
So as the labor progressed, the next slide, ma'am.
So we were left with one more case, which was a very interesting one. So in this case, she was Mrs. N, and she was 27 years, gravida 3, para 2 L1, and she was 31 weeks when she had come to us. She had gestational hypertension. Her blood pressure was 150/70, and she was on labetalol. So the blood pressure was controlled on labetalol, and her uric acid, however, was slightly higher. And this patient, when we did the ultrasound, we found that the PPD came to around 30/6, so it was the same. And the AC was quite less. So I've mentioned the third centile here, and it was quite less than the third centile. The other things were all okay. The weight was 1.09. The Likert, however, was around, not very less, but around normal only. So we did the Dopplers, and we found that, as you can see here, there is absent flows. So when you look at the umbilical artery, there is AEDF. Then you don't look at the PI. There is absent flows. So you know that this is AEDF. Now we have to manage her according to the AEDF. So as we know, once it is AEDF, what do? We do ultrasounds more frequently, Dopplers. So you can do bi-weekly or alternate day also. Or as ma'am said, if you have facilities, you can do daily also, because you don't know. And especially we need to do it daily here more so because it is a hypertensive case, and you know that she can drastically deteriorate anytime. So in this case, at least the blood pressures were all been normal, and she was a baby of the baby was of around 1 kg. So how will we manage this case was the important thing here. And because she was 31 weeks, we could have given Maxelf to this patient for neuroprotection. And of course the NST and Doppler has to be done daily in her. So we followed this with the Dopplers, and we found after just 1 or 2 days, as that is at around 32 weeks, that she was having reversal of flows. So as you can see here, the reversals are there. So once you have REDF in a patient who is more than 30 weeks, you can deliver. So you don't need to wait till any time if you are getting reversals and she is more than 30 weeks. So since we have to terminate this pregnancy, and since she was 32 plus 3, we didn't think of Maxelf in this. But if you are planning to give Maxelf, we have been giving this in many cases, and we have found very good results. So it is very easy that we can give magnesium sulfate. There are 3 different regimes. You can follow this middle one, and all of them have been found to be very good. So this middle one is IV 4 gram over 30 minutes. You can give it as an infusion pump, and this can be given as a single dose. But thing here important is that you have to give it when you're planning delivery. So the delivery has to take place within 24 hours of planning the cesarean. So in this case, because she was 32 plus 3 at the time when she had reversal of flow, we didn't think of giving Maxelf, but we have been giving this. And these are the ideal cases wherever you have a case of hypertension who is around 30 weeks, and there you have to terminate because of a reversal. You can start her on Maxelf, and you will follow all those precautions as you follow when you're giving Maxelf in a patient of eclampsia. So the points that are important over here is that CTG monitoring, as ma'am has already said, that CTG monitoring is important, especially when you're not doing ductus venosus. Then CTG monitoring, and before induction also, like in this case we are not inducing, but remember the first case where we were inducing. So if you have an FGR and you are trying to induce, always do a CTG monitoring just to understand that this patient can withstand labor or not. Then mode of delivery is of course cesarean. I think Dr. Rinku has come. I'm already finished.
So, no, should I take questions, ma'am? Because I don't think there is any time for the cases. Is there any time slides? Or I'll go to the cases if there is time. Please let me know.
Ma'am, we have time. Don't worry. You can go ahead.
Okay, fine.
Rinku, go ahead with your presentation.
Okay, fine. I'm just opening it. वापस जाओ. So the same case that I was showing you, with those short-lasting variable decelerations, and now you can see here that this mother has started. अपने आप से कैसे हो रहा है यार? I'm not even touching the screen. Okay, so this is the slide we started with, these variable decelerations, and then you see here the CTG is comparatively better. The baseline is clearly discernible. And then in the next slide, you see the mother pushing. So, the bottom line is that when you start seeing decelerations in a mother in labor, don't panic. Look at all the parameters of CTG and then come to a conclusion. So let's go on to the next slide. Now you see this, how the decelerations are getting progressively deeper and wider. So the point of showing you this slide is you see how the contractions are getting more frequent. You can see in the second slide, and probably this mother needs to relax, uterine relaxation. That means we need to give her something for hyperstimulation. I saw one of the questions being asked which says, what do you give for hyperstimulation? So in our hospital, we are giving NTG sublingually. We are giving an NTG spray sublingually, 400 microgram. It works very well because terbutaline is not available in Delhi. So moving on to the next presentation, next slide. You see, ma'am has already talked to us about the theory of CTG. One thing that I want to emphasize here is that please understand what the baseline is. Until you understand the baseline, you cannot understand acceleration and deceleration because everything is in relation to the baseline. The variability is in relation to the baseline. So supposing you get a CTG where you cannot make out the baseline, you will not be able to make out decelerations and accelerations also. And you may have a CTG which is non-interpretable, and that's absolutely fine. You cannot interpret each and every CTG. So if you have a non-interpretable CTG, you continue the CTG, call in your senior or your colleague to understand it better. So moving on, you see every CTG strip that I show you or you see cannot tell you how you will manage the patient. That's not possible because you have to look at the entire story. You cannot look at one CTG and come to a diagnosis. Now you look at this strip and you see that the upper one is showing that the previous CTG is very good. We are very comfortable with its baseline variability and its the baseline. And then you see this sudden deceleration, which is lasting for quite a long time, definitely more than 3 minutes, and it is picking up again. Now, this mother actually, did very well later. She was having these isolated decelerations, probably because of cord compression, say 2 or 3 times in a day. Basically, she was admitted for blood pressure monitoring, and we did a CTG just like that. And we landed up detecting these isolated decelerations, and that could have been normal. So whenever you notice something like this, make her left lateral or make her get up. Sometimes a supine position can provoke this. These decelerations are usually nothing to worry as long as you have ruled out acute accidents like abruption, rupture, and cord prolapse. So let's move on to the next one. And this is also a similar kind. You could have it after an ARM or after a position change or even after an epidural. So usually nothing to worry. Now look at these decelerations. You see these decelerations coming frequently. Now again, if somebody asks me how will you manage this mother, I will say you show me the entire CTG and then only I can comment. But I've taken out this strip for you to understand that these are decelerations on first look. You should start worrying about them. Why you want to worry? Because number one is that the baby is staying at the baseline for a very short time, whereas the baby is decelerating for a longer period of time. And this is what we typically call the subacute hypoxia kind of a change, which could be due to hyperstimulation or a tachysystole where there are frequent contractions. For every CTG, you should be able to differentiate the maternal heart rate. If you can see, there's a small tracing that you see in between the contraction and the fetal heart, which is showing the maternal heart. Now, when you see the CTG, the first thing that should occur to you is, is the mother having too many contractions? Do I want to stop the oxytocin? Do I want to give a tocolytic? Now, moving on. Now, you look at this CTG. Now, this is again a different patient, and you see these decelerations. I'm not at all happy about them because the baseline, it has kind of increased. Like the way we talk about evolving hypoxia, the baseline increases, the decelerations become wider and deeper. And gradually this baby is going to be more and more hypoxic. Now, whether this baby will come out fine at this stage or not will depend on what the CTG was before, whether this baby was term or preterm, whether this baby has meconium or not. So that is a total wide spectrum of questions that you have to ask yourself. Now, moving on. One very important thing that you must note in every CTG is the dynamism of the CTG. Now, you see in this CTG how things have suddenly worsened. The variability has gone down, the fetal heart is going up and down, what we call, a totally unstable baseline. So this baby has suddenly deteriorated from this stage to this stage. Okay, moving on. So for every CTG, what is really important to note before you make any interpretation whatsoever is whether the CTG has a time setting, it has a paper speed, because we are used to seeing 1 centimeter per minute. But if you are used to 3 centimeter per minute, then your variability understanding will change. Maternal heart rate, very important. So all these factors have to be taken into account, whether the mother is in the first stage or second stage, because you know that in second stage, the CTG can change drastically. And you look at the CTG, can you guess? This is a maternal heart rate. This mother had an intrauterine death, an old intrauterine death. And you know, somebody did a CTG because the mother said that my fetal movements are fine. And later on, it was detected as intrauterine death. So you look at this CTG and you try and see. See now, supposing I give you this CTG, one very good thing about this CTG is it is clearly showing you the contractions, it is showing you the maternal heart rate and the fetal heart rate. Now, of course, the CTG is not normal, but you know, in labor, 80% of the time, some abnormality, 80% of labors will have some abnormal portions of CTG. You have to understand that. And you have to see whether this baby needs to come out right now or we can wait. Now, this is a CTG which is showing tachycardia, but the variability is good. So there's some good things about the CTG and there's some bad things about the CTG. And the good thing is that the variability is good. But the bad thing is that there are some decelerations if you consider this as the baseline. And actually, this mother was nearing the second stage. You can see the mother is pushing, and with every pushing effort, the fetal heart is going up. It happens very commonly in the second stage. Second stage CTGs can look very abnormal sometimes, but babies come out very well. Now, this is the CTG which is showing an isolated fetal tachycardia. I will not at all be worried about the CTG because although there is tachycardia, the baby is moving. There are the mother has marked baby movements and there are good accelerations and variability. So this is a baby which is showing, you know, a good variability, a good acceleration, and is an adequately oxygenated baby. This is the active sleep phase of the baby. Most babies stay in this phase 60% of the time. 10% of the time, the baby stays in this phase. This is called the 4F phase. That means this is the phase in which the baby will move a lot. The mother will say, you know, I'm having lots and lots of movements, and you will see these sustained accelerations. Now, this CTG, if you tell me that this CTG is of a mother who is in second stage and is pushing, then I may be a little worried because this baseline is not very stable. But if you tell me this is an antenatal CTG, low risk mother, I just did a CTG like that, the mother is marking a lot of movements, I will not be worried. Because 10% of the time, the baby is in a normal physiological state like this. And 30% of the time, the baby is in sleep phase, the phase in which there is a reduced variability. So you see this mother came with reduced variability and, this continued for a while and we were worried. When we took a history, we realized that this mother had got pethidine on our back and this kind of pattern continued. But after a couple of hours, you see how the baby is moving and accelerations happen. So you have to look at the overall clinical picture and then come to a conclusion. Now look at this. In contrast, this is a mother who is having, who just came to us at 35 weeks with loss of fetal movements. Now you see these isolated decelerations which are happening, unprovoked, no contractions. And this is continuing for some time. Now, we did an ultrasound and we found that the Likert was less than 1. On detailed history taking, we realized that this mother had low-grade fever 2 to 3 days back. And we did a cesarean for this mother and the baby was quite acidotic. And in fact, this mother came COVID positive later. So you understand that this viremia or this infection can also cause this kind of pattern. Just like one of the causes of chronic hypoxia is infection, is feto-maternal hemorrhage, and severe fetal anemia, like due to vasa previa or any such cause. Another very interesting, you see now, looking at these two cases, you see the case 2 and the case 3, they both are showing a pseudo-sinusoidal pattern. But this case 2 mother is a low-risk mother. She just came and we are doing, sometimes routine NSTs, which we shouldn't do. And we found this and we were a little worried, 40 plus 1, and then we induced her and she had a perfectly normal, healthy baby. But this other mother came at 37 weeks with reduced fetal movements. You see, the same pseudo-sinusoidal pattern. And what happens? After some time, after some time, you see this mother had a deceleration, and we were not happy because the mother continued to have less movements, and we did a cesarean, and this is what the outcome was. This was a mother with feto-maternal hemorrhage. The FMH was around 30 ml, but this baby did quite well. If the FMH is high, then some babies do very poorly, as you know. Now, this is another case where you see this mother is a term. There is no MSL. The previous CTG was normal, although this strip is showing a little less variability, but the previous CTG was normal. And in labor, she suddenly has this subacute hypoxia pattern. So what is the cause? Again, hyperstimulation. We give her sublingual NTG, and after some time, what happens is that the CTG becomes a bit better, and she starts pushing and she delivers normally, and the baby is fine. So the idea that we have to look at the stage of labor, at what stage she is, whether we can help the aggravating factors, the hypoxic factors, which can, like if it is an epidural, if it is oxytocin, or if it is the mother's position, whether we can help, in correcting the CTG as much as possible, instead of just straight away doing a cesarean. Scalp stimulation is another very good method. You could just, stimulate the scalp, pinch the scalp, or, with an Alice or with your finger. And for most babies who give a good acceleration with your pinching will do well when you're not sure, about a suspicious CTG. Second stage CTGs are a separate challenge altogether. These are 3 CTG strips from different mothers with different APGARs. You see, this CTG is not something I'm going to really worry, because the baseline is good, the variability is good, but there are some decelerations with every pushing effort in the mother. In this CTG, you can't really make out a pattern. Although you see, one of the problems of second stage CTG is we cannot take a good trace. But you can see it going up and down, although the variability is fine. And this baby had an APGAR of 478. Now, this last case, you see how bad the CTG is. The baseline you can't make out, the variability you can't make out. This kind of a CTG is very worrying in second stage, or for that matter in any stage. So in second stage, when you're interpreting a CTG, you also have to see what the prior CTG was like. A baby who was doing well in first stage can tolerate much more in second stage compared to a baby who was already hypoxic in first stage. So to conclude, whenever you interpret anything, you have to look at the CTG before, you have to look at the entire clinical picture. When you suspect acute hypoxia, acute deceleration, or a bradycardia, rule out the acute events. If you are sure there are no acute events, most of these decelerations will correct on their own. You prepare for a cesarean, but don't do it. Wait for at least 6 to 9 minutes to see what is happening, because a baby who is doing very well will suddenly not become hypoxic without a cause. And how long has the non-reassuring feature been? This is really important. When you are sitting on a non-reassuring or a suspicious feature, and you feel that, okay, this baby will probably do well, good variability, good baseline, take a second opinion, And most babies, like Dr. Khemani said, who have a good variability and a good baseline, means that they are compensating with that hypoxia, and you don't need to worry. So basically, the conclusion is you have to understand that whether it is an intrapartum hypoxia, remembering that most babies can compensate for intrapartum hypoxia and they will still do very well. But if it is an intrapartum hypoxia, how quickly is it setting in? Is it something like a cord prolapse? Then you don't have any time. How long has it been there? And is it continuously happening, or, the baby is getting time to breathe again? That means the baby is coming back to its baseline. Does the baby have time to cope? Can this particular baby cope? If it is an IUGR baby, chances of it deteriorating fast is higher. And what is the cause? Like, you have to always keep thinking about the cause, whether the cause is reversible or not reversible. Thank you so much, and really, really sorry for the mess that I did today. I'm really sorry. I apologize.
That was an excellent presentation, Rinku, and don't apologize. We are still learning about the webinars. Okay. Over to you, Manisha. Manisha Mehta. not Manisha.
I understand.
Dr. Kanika, Dr. Manisha, can you hear us? Are there any questions? Do you want to take questions? Do we have time? Dr. Kanika, are you there?
So, ma'am, there is a question which is asking what are the indications of CTG monitoring? Somebody's asked that question.
Okay, Rinku, you tell.
So, yeah, so one comment that I want to make is that we are doing too many CTGs these days, which probably is leading to so much of false positive cesareans. So, you know, for low risk mothers, you really don't need to do a CTG at all, unless as long as you have somebody monitoring after every contraction for 1 minute in active labor, somebody who's trained to do that. And as per guidelines, you should do continuous CTG monitoring in every high risk mother, and we all know the list of high risk. But in practice, in private practice, we are mostly doing CTGs. We all know we want a medical legal thing and we want this. So if you're even doing routinely, then don't do it continuously for low risk mothers. Do it every maybe half an hour in active labor and take a strip of 15 minutes, and then you give the mother time to walk, to relax. And of course, in government hospitals, like Dr. Manisha knows very well, we can't do CTG in every mother, and we shouldn't be doing it. There is no indication to do in low risk mothers.
I'll just sum up, suppose if your patient, you are inducing patient. Yeah. Patient is
Then
on
we have to do.
Patient has meconium. Yeah.
Continuous
Just previous LSCS. Any high risk factor, you will do the CTG.
Sure.
Dr. Kanika, Dr. Manisha.
Anji ma'am, we are here. And Dr. Mr. Neeraj, can we take 5-10 minutes of question answers if you allow?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Fine, ma'am. Then we continue with the question answers. Shall I take the questions? Dr. Manisha, are you there?
Yes.
Dr. Manisha, I think, okay. So there is a question by Dr. Asha Chaudhary. Patient is 30 weeks with preeclampsia. Baby weight estimated is 900 grams. Doppler is normal. BP is normal. But the CTG is persistently showing tachycardia. How will we manage? Ma'am?
So I think Dr. Rinku can answer that. CTG one.
So this is a mother who is low risk and everything is fine. Is that what I understand? And the baby is showing tachycardia on CTG. Is that what I understood?
Basically, the at 30 weeks, the estimated weight is 900 grams. And the
30 weeks.
30
this
weeks.
Mother is only 30 weeks.
30
so why are we doing a CTG at 30 weeks?
Because the weight is less and the Doppler flows are normal and BP now at present is normal. Otherwise, she has PET. She has preeclampsia.
So an interpretation of a 30-week CTG can be very, very tricky. Okay, so between 28 to 32 weeks, there are controversies on whether we should do CTG or not. And a preterm baby will always have a higher heart rate compared to a term baby. Okay, so just a persistent tachycardia, I would rather base my management on Dopplers and ultrasound rather than CTG.
And
case.
And about her FGR, because her Dopplers are normal, although she might be FGR considering that the baby weight is less. So what we need to do here is we do weekly or twice weekly ultrasound with Doppler to follow whether her Dopplers are normal or not, and accordingly we can manage her.
Okay.
So I would say one thing over here, at 30 weeks with the Doppler flow are normal, I don't think there's any indication to do CTG.
Yes.
Am I right or wrong?
Yes, of course.
Why
I
should we
agree
do
completely.
CTG and then get into what to do for this? There is the indication.
They're showing that even the BP is staying
And
normal.
there is a question that I can see which says there are late decelerations which are multiple and then they recover. What should be done? Can I answer that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Yeah, so late decelerations, multiple. So, by late decelerations, what you can understand is that even if they're recovering late. That is why you're calling them late decelerations, isn't it? So if you are having late decelerations, you have to look at the entire background. Now, supposing this mother is 3 centimeter and you feel that persistently decelerations are happening, which are taking time to recover, although baseline is fine, variability is fine, and with more than 50% contractions, and you think that this is continuing for more than 30 minutes, more than an hour, I don't think we will win a battle by waiting for this particular mother. But you have to look, see, supposing the variability is good, the baseline is good, you don't have to rush. You can wait, provided this mother is not on oxytocin, she's a low risk mother. Sometimes what happens is these late decelerations, they may recover if you just give it time, if you switch off the oxytocin, if you just give it a little time and rule out any aggressors. But if you feel she's only 3 centimeter, that decelerations are not getting better, they're taking time to come to the baseline. The in between baseline is progressively decreasing, the decelerations are happening more, then obviously you take her up for section.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a question regarding which
Dr. Gauri.
loop of umbilical cord which we should look for umbilical artery Dopplers. So basically, you look at the middle loop. You don't go towards baby also, neither you go towards placenta. So if you go more towards baby, the values would be high. If you go towards placenta, the values would be low. So you take a free loop. That's a thing. That's important over here.
Okay. And there's another question from Dr. Gargi Munjar. She's asking, what is your experience of chromosomal microarray in FGR babies for Dr. Manisha, I guess?
So basically, as I was just trying to emphasize that whenever you always try to see what is the cause of FGR. So if you're not getting any cause, it is being said that around say 7 to 20% cases it could be because of some chromosomal abnormality. So because we say that when you're doing karyotype, it is always better to do a CMA, which is a chromosomal microarray, which would give you more information. So from that point of view, always try to do CMA. Of course, CMA is more costly, so you must always counsel this. And in our hospital, as you know, the patients are not that affording, so generally they don't agree. But even though if you have I mean, and the patients come and they are quite understanding and knowledgeable, so you must convey it to them that if since we are not getting any cost, we must think of this, and this is even up to 20% cases it might be there. And especially it is important because when we are delivering the patient, like whether we have to do section or not, we can get an idea about this once we know whether this baby is normal or not. So always try and see whether you can do amniotic fluid and then take amniotic fluid and do CMA. If not possible, at least we can do a karyotype. And if nothing is to be done, then we can counsel them that these are the possibilities. So it's
So
of course
Manisha, what we have
yeah.
Manisha, what we have to emphasize is, like suppose if it's a FGR and there's a hypertension, you don't think about or if there's a FGR with polyhydramnios, then you will take
Unexplained.
all this. So
Yes.
take the patient in toto. Like every FGR, you will not do chromosomal and microarray. There has to
Yes.
be an indication.
Yes. So it is unexplained ones, very
Yes.
important, but unexplained ones where you don't get any maternal high risk in those ones. And plus, many times when you ask the question, they will tell you that I had typhoid during early months. They will tell you all these things. I had fever. So you have to take a proper history. And when you don't get all these, then you think of this. So this is where, and many times there are genetic reasons also. So many genetic conditions that we see, the patient have, IUGR also. So you have to, just tell them that this is the possibility. Just prepare them. So that's important.
Another question from Dr. Mukta Kataria. She wants to know, should a patient always be on continuous CTG in labor?
I don't think so. As Rinku has already answered this question, that in a low risk patient you can do intermittent. But if she has previous LACS, right? You are worried about the scar disease, or if say IUGR or any other high risk, then you can think of CTC because continuous CTG is not viable always, even in the private setup.
Okay. And ma'am, a question for you from Dr. Ashmina Rekhi. She's asking, ma'am, please brief on which tocolytic. Basically, she wants to ask which tocolytic can be used in our setup for subacute hypoxia when all measures fail.
See, Rinku has already answered that they are using nitroglycerins sublingually, 400. She's already answered this question.
I think this question was when you had given your lecture post that she must have posted this.
Okay.
How do you manage a laboring patient with CTG? Do you conduct CTG every 30 minutes? I don't know what her question is. Practically, is she talking about active labor or what? I don't know. I can't understand. This is some Dr. Deepak Kumar.
I think, Kanika, we are just overlapping
Yeah,
same
just,
questions again and again. I think Rinku has already
yeah.
answered all of these questions.
It's over and done with. So I take this opportunity to thank all my speakers. There's an excellent presentation. I know there are some hitches in between. I mean, because of the technology, we're not IT professionals. We're not that tech savvy. But at least our content was excellent, and I'm sure the viewers must have benefited a lot. I have left off for quite some time, but it was really recapitulating and very nice. So I thank Dr. Kimani, Dr. Rinku, Dr. Manisha, and I thank the Sirsa organizers. I would like to invite Dr. Kavita. Is she there?
Dr. Kavita, are you there?
Dr. Kavita from the Sirsa Society. I think she's also having some
Problem for the, yeah, it's all the Sirsa problem, we'll say. Manisha was saying that Sirsa, the internet is very slow. So it's
Yeah.
probably,
Probably. So thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot, and it was really enjoyable. My honor to be with you again on this webinar. And thank you, Manisha. Thank you, Rinku.
Thank you. Thank you so much
thank
for
you very
calling.
much.
Thank
Okay,
you.
right? Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Mamta. Manisha.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Bye. Take care. Let's